Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Volpe Creates Show. I am your host, Chris Volpe, joined as always by Baby Girl. Here, my and then Pumpkins around here causing trouble, and of course, Mr. Lucas. How are you doing today? You are. It's been a week, huh?
It's been crazy overall, but ready to go.
Great. Well, every week, of course, we're talking about video games and creative technology. Sweetie, you want to get down? And we bring a special guest. This week, I'm super excited. Chris Bergman, my buddy from many years, and I think a fellow sort of entrepreneur, startup, crazy man, like what the hell are we doing kind of colleague. But Chris, welcome to the show.
Hey fellas, how you guys doing?
I'm good. I am good.
Great.
Before we get too far in this, why don't you give a quick little 10-second blurb about
The,
you?
the bio. Yeah,
Hmm.
I'm Chris Bergman. I'm the CEO and founder of Guiley Games. We make video games for PC and console, premium video games for PC and console. And then I'm also the general partner at the Fund Midwest, where I invest in tech startups in the Midwest. And I'm a DJ as well. I can go under Bergs as a DJ. I think that covers the main bases.
Everything.
Yeah.
So before we start, your company name, where did that come from?
Yeah, so my kids' names are Guy and Lee. So that's where Guiley Games came from. It's just laziness for branding and
Oh,
just needed a name and didn't feel like spending the time and effort to like get a good one.
mhm. Nice. I tried to give you a little like good father
Oh
props,
no,
and
did
you.
I drop? What happened?
Oh, are you gone?
Oh, you're still here with
There you are.
us.
There you are.
Oh,
I
okay, there
see
you
you.
go.
I haven't lost you. Can you hear us? Are we here? Is the
Yeah,
world
yeah,
still
yeah.
going?
You're here.
Okay, awesome. Well, like I said, I was trying to give you some good father props, and then you promptly undercut all that. So, um,
No, they love it though. They flaunt it at, they wear all the Guiley merch at school and all that good stuff. So I think it worked out well.
yeah, awesome. So I think we've got a whole bunch of stuff that we can talk about today, but we've only got so much time, so we'll wind our way through this fun river. But one of the things I wanted to pull up because I think that a lot of people who watch us and write in comments or questions in the chat and stuff, they want to see you kind of behind the curtain in the game developer world. And so one of the first things I'd like to jump out is your current game that you are working on. You demoed at GDX this year, and it
Hmm.
was the first time you'd ever showcased it somewhere. Uh, and I think, I mean, first of all, it won some awards, so congrats on that. But
Thanks, man.
also, I know that at least initially, you all were excited to come, but you weren't 100% sort of ready, we'll say, on it. So, like, where did you decide on that line where you're just like, screw it, we're going to show it, and like, your cutscenes weren't ready, and certain things just were not ready to go, but you're like, screw it, we're doing this anyway. Like,
Yeah, that's a great question, man. I mean, so for us, yeah, the cutscenes aren't rendered; they were storyboarded primarily, but we had all the VO in there, and the story was complete as far as like a demo is concerned. And I think it's a couple things. One, GDX is a very friendly con, right? Like the audience there is super empathetic to that, and kind of as opposed to like some other cons where like people can get pretty harsh on criticisms and stuff. And then the other thing was we've sort of hit this point where we wanted like a bulk of user feedback as opposed to doing sort of one-off play tests with people. And so spending the weekend to get a bulk, we got, I don't know, a couple hundred people to play through it and give us feedback, which I thought was really good, and took copious amounts of notes, which was also helpful. But it was really timing. It felt like a safe place to show the game off. Did not expect to win any awards or anything like that at all. I mean, that was a total surprise. Just wanted to get the team out there to see how people, how strangers play the game, right? And people that aren't necessarily friendly to what we're building. So that was super interesting and super surprising to get some of that feedback. All of which was like, I think the surprise was the positive feedback. Like all the negative feedback, we were like, oh yeah, we know that. Yeah, there's a Jira ticket for that. And then But all the positive feedback from people I think was really really cool, especially seeing like younger people, their parents like have to pull them away from the game and that kind of thing. That was really fun.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Uh, so you briefly touched on kind of what you were looking to get out of the show, and you said you got a lot of like positive feedback. What is some of that feedback that's the most like useful for you?
Yeah, so I think for one, like we had this tutorial section in the game that everyone was struggling with. And like what was supposed to be like a 30-second tutorial for people to get through to like understand controls was taking people like 2 to 3 minutes, and they were getting frustrated during that process. So
Yeah,
like we realized that that was too difficult. Like just as a quick example of like, okay, how is the pacing? It's especially for us now. We've played the game hundreds of times, so we have no real idea of how the pacing feels anymore, especially for that level or the levels that we've been working on for so long. And so to watch other people play it for the very first time and see how pacing is for them, I think was really helpful. Like we're okay, we can speed this up, slow this down. The environment works really well here. This is taking too long. This fight's too difficult. This fight actually feels really good. Those kind of things were very helpful for us.
uh, yeah. We've talked with a lot of devs on the show about like the value you get from just having people play the game. Because like you said, you do it again. Like as on the dev side, you were doing the same thing over and over and over again. It's like the old joke about QA testers. It's like, oh, I want to be a QA tester for a game and I get to play games all day. It's like, yeah, you do, but most of them are jankety and broken, and you're
Yeah.
playing like the same level 1,000 times. But to get your controller in the hands of players, they're going to find all sorts of weird stuff. I remember once our game Hatchet that we put out for iOS and Android, that was 2015. Um, Once it got out there, we actually saw people on YouTube like beating levels in ways that we'd never conceived before. And one guy was like really into the game, and he was finding little ways to like just completely decimate the scoreboard. I was like, we have played each of these levels thousands of times, and we'd never come up with like that solution before. Pumpkin, you need a place here.
Yeah, we're
Uh,
I mean for us we think a lot about speedrunners. We're definitely like making sure that we have a bunch of sort of timing mechanics in it for speedrunners specifically because we want to see them break it. I mean, games done quick is like one of my favorite events on Twitch that happens all the time. So I'm excited
yeah,
for our game to eventually be a part of that.
yeah, that's awesome. We have talked. It's been, I mean, this was pre-COVID, but we had talked with the Games Done Quick people about maybe getting them out to do something cool at GDX, some kind of event for charity or whatever. Um, so one of the things along these lines, I was listening to a podcast last week with Mike Judge was on it, and he was talking about the early days of Beavis and Butthead, and like he did the animations and stuff by hand, and it took him forever. And so he's like, it could take me 2 to 4 weeks to work on an episode. And he's like, at some point along the line, he's just like, I can't even remember if this is funny or not. He's like, I thought it was funny at some point, so I'm just gonna keep doing it. But like, you sort of in any creative endeavor, you kind of lose a little bit of that grasp on, is this fun? Is this funny? Is this doing what it's supposed to do? Um, do you guys have like I don't know what the word, my brain just dumped, like a community that you do QAing through, that you send out to people to like do tests, or is it pretty much all internal?
Yeah, I mean we have an internal QA group that does all of our bug testing and stuff like that. We do typically do a couple playthroughs a week with people that are sort of friends and family or random like the barista next door or something like that. We'll have them come in and play the game and we have a really good senior producer Kim who runs a playthrough process for all these people and collects like a ton of information from them and that's always like so we've done probably 100 or so of those at this point and just to get kind of that feedback and make sure that we're constantly having people I think what's interesting in getting outside of that sort of myopic view of how you're viewing the game when you're making it is you have to get really good at watching other people play it and watching strangers play it and learning what to take from that and what to like leave and one of the rules when we have a playthrough, one of the rules that Kim puts on me when we have a playthrough is for me to not help them at all through puzzles. And all I want to do if I'm playing
yeah.
is just be like, it's right, it's right there. It's right.
Yeah.
Just shoot that target. Just, and,
Yeah.
which drives me nuts not being able to do that. But it's really good for us making sure the games, we're trying to make something that's super approachable and you kind of look like Cuphead, but not play like Cuphead, right? Like we don't want to make something that's hyper difficult. So for us, it's always making sure that it's very doable and that the learning curve is slow and gradual as opposed to like real steep.
Yeah. That's a good bit of insight that Kim, she's got a good head on her shoulders. She's still sitting right next to you over there.
Yeah, she is. She's right next to me. Kim, say hi. I'm gonna put you on the podcast.
But yeah, I think yeah, we've talked about the sort of the games are your baby thing, and you got to kind of think about what is your goal and what you're doing, right? If you're doing a play testing session or you're taking it out to a show, your goal in this case is to get feedback, and if you're standing over their shoulder telling them what to do, you're influencing the feedback.
The feedback,
right?
yeah.
And that's really, particularly when it comes to like puzzle games and stuff, like you need to see if they can make if that glide path for them, like you said, is smooth enough that folks can figure it out. What we've talked to before, but like I really do believe, I think that people are really good at telling you like what's wrong with a game or what they don't like about a game. They're typically pretty terrible about telling you how to fix it. So that I think comes into play with what you were saying, where what do you keep and what do you leave? Particularly with newer studios, I've found there's this like, whenever they hear any bit of like negative feedback, they're like, "Oh, we've got to go fix this right away." And you're like, you don't have to fix everything that everybody says all the time. It's gonna drive.
Yeah,
you
we
crazy.
focus a lot on player feelings, right? Like, so we'll ask often. Like one of our questions that we ask during a playthrough is always, was there a time that you felt really powerful, or was there a time where you felt weak and helpless, right? Because we want them to always feel powerful. We never want them to feel weak and helpless. And so we wait to see if they bring up some sort of moment in the gameplay or the combat that made them feel that way. But we try to steer more towards feelings as opposed to like, does this uppercut move fast enough, right? Like
Yeah.
sort of hard tangible mechanics.
That's a really interesting way to think about it. I've talked to many developers. I had a conversation actually this week of like high end developers. Like these were not new folks. And I was trying to like be like, okay, well, we're doing some pre planning. I was like, what do we want the player experience to be here? Like, what do we want them to feel? And I had a remarkable amount of trouble getting them to be able to answer that, where they're like, oh, we want it to like look real cool, or like we want this mechanic to do this. I'm like, I don't. Games, I mean, any medium really are like, the term empathy generators gets thrown around a lot, but like that's what media is. Like that's what art is. It's attempting to create a emotional response in you in some way. And I think that if your focus isn't on what you want the player to feel during this experience, I think it can kind of lead you astray. It's interesting that you use the term powerful. Like, what is that in relation to your? Because I mean, it's not God mode, right? Like,
Right. No, not at all. But for us, like our characters are these badass women. We want the player to feel badass. Like you should feel that way when you're beating up a bunch of robots.
So
And
this isn't like
so
a Dark Souls crushing you into the ground
no,
sort of
no, not at
experience.
all. No. I mean, this should feel casual. It should be fun. It's very narrative driven. We want people to experience the story. And we want people to feel like badasses. So that's why we focus on that, I think. Yeah.
That makes sense. So I am going to ask you a question that I typically don't ask because I hate the like, why did you get into video games question?
Yeah.
But I think that you have had a really interesting sort of pathway into what you're currently doing. And I kind of joke when I teach game design and I talk to a lot of parents and then they're like, how did you get into games? Or I was like, do not follow my path. My path is a wild, winding road full of lots of student loan debt. Do not follow my path. But you've had definitely a unique sort of entry point into where you are now. I don't know how much of that you feel comfortable talking about, but I'd be curious on why you decided this medium as a way to like create a business around and express yourself.
Yeah, man. I mean, I've always wanted to make games since I was, 8, 9, 10 years old. But definitely grew up in an environment where that wasn't supported well. Like I didn't understand how to go do that. I grew up in a very blue collar place, and so the idea of doing any sort of white collar work in general was frowned upon. Especially any creative work was very frowned upon. My pathway, I mean, just to do a real quick summary: high school dropout, so upside, never had any of that debt. But high school dropout, and then ended up skating professionally for a while, and then started doing web design. I started in print design. I was an art director for a skate magazine, and then print design became web design as web took over print. RIP Borders, books and music. And then web became apps, and so we started making apps for brands like Maker's Mark, Sam Adams, New Balance shoes. And then I made my own app, which was Chore Monster, which was an app for gamification of chores for families. Which, like, some people are like, well, you were a game designer at that point, and I argue no, but I see that side as well. Um, and so Disney invested in that company. We sold that to Verizon in 2018, and I was at Verizon headquarters for a grand total of 4 months, and really struggled being in a big corporate environment, and quit.
Are you unemployable at this point?
Yeah. Oh, very much, very, very much. I mean, I've always been
Yeah.
unemployable, right? Like, no high school diploma, it's kind of hard to get a job. So, so I've been an entrepreneur the whole time, right? And
Yeah.
and kicked it around Manhattan for like 9 months trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I like rented office space from BetaWorks, which is like the guys that made Dots and Two Dots and all those guys, and like hung out with them for a bit, and finally came home after 9 months, and to my wife, and I was like, hey, I think I want to make video games now. And she goes, oh my God, it took you 9 months to figure that out. What the fuck is wrong with you? Like, we were all waiting for you to do that.
Yeah.
And so then that sort of started the path on pre-production for Rah Rah Boom. And going and raising a bunch of money to do that. I think the one thing that I have that really helps is experience in raising capital,
Yeah.
and sort of finding the fuel needed to enable games to be made.
So let's talk about that a little bit more. You and I have had many a conversation about this over drinks, but it is a fundamental question that I get constantly. I mean,
Mhm.
as sort of like the role I play in the community, people come up to me a lot about like, how do you get started? How do I make that transition from like full-time corporate work to developing, my own project? How do you fund it? And as someone who's been in the entrepreneur sphere for a long time, the reality is most companies fold in the first 3 years. And a lot of that has to do, I won't say a lot of it, but a significant portion has to do with just being able to consistently have income generated or some sort of revenue stream, which is difficult when you're making a software product because it can take 18, 24 months before you can even get something out the door that could even conceivably generate any kind of revenue, which then puts you into either debt. You take out loans or whatever, business loans, which I'm not a big fan of, or you raise money. And I think a lot of people, kind of initially go to the friends and family with their hat out, right? Like, help me be a big boy here. And maybe you've got some friends that can give you some cash. But the reality is, if you want to have good people and be able to hire them, you got to pay them,
Mhm.
right? So how did you go about getting? Well, let's start overall. What is sort of your philosophy on raising money? We'll start there, and then I think the second sort of asterisk to that is like, how do you make the first play? Like the first one's always the hardest. Like, how do you make that first play?
Yeah, I mean, I'm for capital in regards to having it. Like, it's pretty nice
It's
to be
better to
able to
have it
pay
than not.
people. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if I think we've talked about this and but before, like when I started multivarious, like I left OSU, I cashed out my retirement. We didn't really have like clients or anything. The first couple of years I was paying myself like 24 grand a year,
Hmm.
like it was, and keeping in mind this is a guy that has two master's degrees and I'm coming out of healthcare and making $24,000 a year, before taxes, not after. Um, so I agree, having capital is much better than not having capital.
Yeah. 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 I mean, for me, so there's, so I can talk primarily about equity capital, right? Like, there's loans, there's grants, there's a bunch of different ways to sort of get money as a business owner. Equity capital is the way that I prefer to finance all the dumb shit that I do. And so equity capital, we're talking about giving away a part of your company to investors. And I think for some people, that's a really scary endeavor to do that, right? Because there's a lot of fear in, oh, I won't have control of this company, or I'm going to have people to answer to. I'm going to be held accountable. And I found that like having that accountability actually makes me a better CEO, for sure. And I've been lucky enough that I've had the same capital partners now for 8 years, 7 or 8 years. And so we really know how to work together and how to communicate well together. But like the reality is diversifying your own risk. Like in your case, you're risking everything yourself, right? You're risking all of your own money. You're risking everything in this company.
Yeah.
By diversifying my risk. So
And my
my
time.
biggest, yeah, yeah, and that's my biggest risk is time, right? And not doing other projects where I could get paid, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Um, but diversifying that risk means that you also have a group of supporters that are trying to help you succeed as well. They want you to succeed as much as you want to succeed. And so that emotional fuel can be extremely valuable and helpful, especially when you're in, the trenches. And I mean, we're on year 3 of rah. We still got another year before we're going to recognize any revenue, right? It can get, it's a marathon, not a sprint to get a game out the door. And that there's times where you're going to feel winded and tired, and you still got to reach that next milestone, or fix that bug that like is impossible to fix, or scrap your entire animation flow and start over, which we've done for our game. um Having other people on your board that own part of the company that are helping you succeed, I think is for me personally a really great way to continue to move forward and be a good CEO.
Yeah. So do you do equity of the company, not of the product? Is that
Of the company, yeah, yeah,
of
yeah,
the
yeah,
company?
yeah. Yep, which is rare in video games for sure.
Yeah.
Typically you have publishers that are taking royalty cuts on games. I haven't seen a deal that I liked for that yet. Especially as far as like the way that recoups work. um I'd much rather earn. There's a lot of publishers that you don't see a dime till they recoup all their money, and like that seems like a lot of risk for me.
Yeah. Totally.
I want to see revenue. I want to see income on our side day one as well. Um,
Yeah. Well, I think that goes back to what you're saying about having. I'm a huge believer in inlined incentives. I think you need to both be looking in the same direction and sharing the same vision. And when you talk about those deals, like you said, where you don't get any money until they get their money back, I don't feel like that's an aligned incentive because it a good partner would not want to put you at that disadvantage where you
mhm.
potentially are 3 or 6 months or more of no revenue generation before you start to see anything from that. And it goes back to sort of you're spreading the risk. That's like, if somebody believes in you, then they have to be willing to take a little bit of, a risk as well. And now you could argue they're taking the risk just in giving you the money, but uh, you just don't want to work with somebody that's going to leave you high and dry for 6 months because like your bills are still coming in, you know?
Yep, yeah, and money's cheap, man. I mean, it's if all you're bringing to the table is money, you're probably not a partner that I want to work with anyway.
Yeah. I think that's another big thing too, is there's a lot of publishers that I've seen popping out that I'm not quite sure what value they're adding. Some folks who have been to GDX have used publishers where when they tell me what their arrangement is, I'm like, I don't know if you're getting much out of this here, you know. And at that point, it's usually too late. You know, what can you do? But
Yeah, and I mean,
um,
a lot of these guys, it's their first games. They're trying to get market validation,
yeah,
and just personal validation as well, right? Like just getting that checkbox of like I signed to a publisher can feel good, man. And I think if you think about their long-term career, it's probably great. It's great to go through that experience. I think, right? We're lucky in that we can self-publish and prefer it because we have the team that can go do all the marketing and everything that we need to do from that standpoint. Um, but yeah, like there's a ton of game devs that don't want to handle that side of making games.
sure. Yeah, I think uh, it's challenging. I the how do I phrase this? The note about the validation kind of struck a chord with me because I've worked with partners where their main concern, uh, Casey time with my cat here apparently, but their main concern was like, oh, I just want to get published. Like for them, that was the
The
goal, right?
goal,
And
yeah.
they'd feel good. I was like, dude, like I don't think it's worth just getting published because after the validation fades, you're still stuck in it what equates to like a marriage with a partner that might not be beneficial for you. And so I think I do think, and some of the people I've worked with as partners, they're always like, oh man, don't be careful, like don't push them. Like they have that initial sort of scaredness where they're like, don't push them too far, they'll walk away. And I was like, guys, this is the time for them to walk away. If the arrangement doesn't make sense for both parties, then it's okay to walk away. Like that's fine. But I think a lot of new folks they get scared that like, oh, this is the only opportunity that's going to come, and if it doesn't work out, I'm never going to see another publisher again, or whatever. Um, so you mentioned you got your two partners here. Uh, when you first brought them on, was it just like a straight equity split? You just like they give you X money, and or has this been like an ongoing sort of? Are you revisiting the capital need like every year, a couple of years, or?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely revisit the capital need somewhat regularly. But yeah, I mean, it's these are longtime partners of mine, and so it was a pretty straightforward sort of here's how we're gonna they're essentially co-founders in the company. They were part of the formation of the company. So and it's a different approach than even what I would do on the venture side, right? Because these are guys that I've known for forever, and they helped me succeed with Tour Monster, and they're helping me succeed with this company as well.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, finding those great partners, it's huge. We've raised we have 250K raise on a convertible note right now, which um, I'm not the biggest fan of convertible notes, but that's a whole other story for another day. Um, but our partners have been great. Like they they're always available if I need them. We have conversations. We'll go grab a drink and talk things over. And like they're never on my ass about stuff. Like they're not just like I don't think they've ever once, to be honest, told me to do anything. So
Hmm.
that's a good move.
Because a good investor is investing in you, man, and your decision making process. Now, I'll often come to them like, "Hey, what do I do here? How do I?" You're
Sure.
asking. The goal is to be asking for advice, right?
Yeah.
Um, but they're entrusting your ability to lead the company. That's the whole point that they're putting money in.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the going and asking them questions is a big thing because, like you said, it's you said money is cheap. It is it's a lot more effective if you can take your time and find a partner that is going to give you the money, but also sees your vision, understands it. They are behind you, like you said, as a person, and they are excited to help you. It's not just something they throw money at and then walk away. Like I own
Hmm.
a bunch of stocks, right? And like I put money in them, and like I'll check them every so often, but like I'm not calling up Tim Cook telling him how to run Apple, right? Now maybe if I was Warren Buffett, maybe I could do that, uh, but just getting that relationship, because it is a marriage. That all those business partnerships are a form of marriage. So when you are so like Rah Rah Boom, you said you're on 3 years of dev. You got another year or so to keep cooking this thing. Um, was that your original timeline? I mean,
God no,
did you estimate it right?
no. I'm about 4 times over, I'd say, from the initial. But I mean, we didn't know what we didn't know, right? Like we had no idea what we were getting into as far as making a 4-player co-op beat 'em up about Ninja Cheerleaders from outer space. That's all hand drawn and hand animated.
Hear you, man. That's pretty much No Mercy, our game in a bucket. Like, um, it's yeah. The more you bite off, the more you can run it. But having those partners um, are really valuable. The spreading risk thing, I kind of cling to as well, because I think a lot of people don't realize. How do I phrase it? It's not that they don't realize, but they don't think about risk in like this sort of generalized business sense. They think about risk as in like, oh, this makes me feel uncomfortable, kind of thing. Um, and working with good partners allows you to spread the risk so that the benefits are all sort of amplified, and the scary lean times can be mitigated. That we just went through. I mean, we're seeing this right now with the repercussions from COVID in a lot of industries still, where it's like you don't know what's going to happen. Sometimes you just have no idea. Like, I mean, you could be developing your game. I don't know if you saw, but Unity just laid off like hundreds of people,
Hmm.
which is not a good sign generally. And so it's totally possible that there are tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of developers working. I don't know anything behind the scenes. I'm not saying Unity's falling apart, but you're making your game in Unity, Unity falls apart. And now what do you do?
Hmm.
And now you gotta work that out, and you have to think about all those risks, and they're hard to put onto a business plan. And we were talking with Jonathan Blow about game design documents, and he's like, oh, I hate game design documents. I don't do anything with them. But like every publisher in the world kind of wants a game design document. Do you have a thorough, beautiful game design document?
God no, no. I mean, we have the initial investor pitch deck that I used, I think, and that's it. Because like you just don't know what you don't know, right? So I mean, for us, it was like, let's stand this game up and start playing and figure out what's fun and what's not, and it's evolved and changed over time for sure. Like it's an iterative process. I come from tech development, which is agile development specifically, is
Yeah.
a completely iterative process. And so we at this point we sort of do a hybrid of like agile and waterfall, where it's much more milestone related, and we kind of look at like, okay, what's the next milestone, what are we trying to get done. Right now we're like putting in our other 2 characters, so we have all 4 characters playable. And then once that's done, we'll take a look and see what's next and see what's fun. But as we're starting to get into systems and things, progression system in particular, we're like, oh, this actually needs like some sort of design document, like so we can think about it simultaneously as we're developing. And it's no longer a hypothesis, because like now the game's at a state where we have a good idea of where we want it to look when it's finished, but we need 15 people to get on the same page. And so for that, I think a design doc's actually really good when you're working on a particular feature or aspect of the game. But yeah, we've never, it started with 3 of us being like, all right, let's go play a bunch of beat 'em ups, make some notes, and get started.
Yeah. Well, you hit on a couple of things there. I think using any tool you use, whether it's a platform or whatever, is supposed to be something that helps assist in the creation process. And so using a game design document as a way to like help, like you said, if you've got 15 people looking at something, you, you can't be the only repository of those answers, right? You can't have somebody coming to you every 5 minutes asking a question. So you can create a document that will help be a place that people can reflect back to. But I think a lot of developers get caught in the like, before I even get started, I need to have like this pristine game design
Mm-hmm.
document. I need to have all
Mm-hmm.
the answers figured out. Um, And I guess if you can do that, more power to you. But I've never met a developer that can do that. Um, so I don't know. But I want to jump back to another thing that you said. But I'm kind of curious when you were initially going through the idea for Raw Raw Boom, and you were working on your slide deck, which I'm sure was spectacular. Uh, what was the hook that you were interested in just personally? Was it a mechanics thing? Was it like a theme? Like
It's a couple
what got
different
you
things.
going?
Yeah, so I actually bought rawrawboom.com in 2008 as a URL, and I just like the phonetics of the URL. I didn't have any intent for it. I just, I'm one of those. I collect URLs. I collect
Yeah,
domains.
me too.
I have a real bad habit of doing
Yeah,
that.
they're so cheap.
Especially if I'm out drinking and I just like flip
No,
open GoDaddy while we're talking about something.
dude, I've got like I think we have 4 or 5 beer-based domains that we got
Yeah.
when we were drinking beers. We're like, oh, we should do something with this. It was like sitting around for a decade.
So Rara was one of those, and it just always stuck in my brain. So it initially started as, well, what's Rara Boom? What is that? And it's cheerleaders and guns, and so it just kind of grew up from there, and has iterated over time for sure. But that sort of tied with, I grew up in arcades. I was a competitive Street Fighter player. Guys named after my Street Fighter 4 main. My child. And What I found interesting growing up in arcades, is, the fighting games were always super competitive, whether it was like Marvel or Street Fighter or whatever, and then you'd get your ass kicked, and then you'd go play co-op games. So you go play X-Men or Ninja Turtles or The Simpsons or
Hmm.
those co-op beat 'em ups. And that's where you would make your friends, right? Like, you weren't making friends when you were fighting competitively typically, but you would make friends when you were playing on the other cabinets. And so I always really loved that. Like, that's where my love of arcade beat 'em ups came from, and so why I always wanted to make one. And then the other piece is, my last company, um, our market was primarily millennial moms, and so I got very good at marketing to that market. And I sort of look at, when it comes to video games, there's still this huge gap in games that service women and females. And so I wanted to make something that had an all female cast, that focused on sort of the emotional journeys that these characters go on a bit more than you would normally, without being necessarily like a dating sim or anything like that, while still being like an innovative beat 'em up run and gun mashup. And so I think all of that kind of together was enough of a hook for me to be like, yeah, I'm going to go spend, however many years it's going to take to get this thing out the door.
Awesome. Your competitive gaming days, were you like touring around playing?
I would play, yeah, I'd play like local tournaments and stuff, go to Evo and all that good stuff. I also like really loved um, building fight sticks and arcade machines and stuff like that. That was always a fun
Oh wow.
aspect of it for me, and
Yeah.
doing design. I design players' fight sticks and that kind of thing. So much so that we're in Cincinnati. There's a thing called Blink Festival, which is a citywide light festival that happens in October, and we're going to be doing a thing with Rah Rah there, for that. That'll be, I'm building some oversized arcade machines that you'll be able to play the game on the side of a building, and
Oh,
so we have to
nice.
go build those arcade machines, which will be fun. Yeah,
That's awesome. I might have to come down for that.
yeah, you
That
should,
sounds
man. It's a
exciting.
great weekend. Yeah,
Yeah, because we're not doing GDX in the fall, so I got a free
you're
October.
free. Yeah,
Um, that's awesome. Also, are you doing like projection mapping against the building? Is that what?
yeah. Hmm.
That's
Yep.
sweet. Yeah. We did some small projection mapping stuff, projects for, we did a thing for charity for Independence Fest, which was a big festival here in Columbus. But I've always wanted to do more like, I don't know, more like large scale projection mapping
Yeah,
projects.
dude, you got to come see it. It's so cool. I'll send you sort of the little trailer they have of it.
Okay.
So you guys can check it out and see how cool it is.
That'd be sweet. And there's some great restaurants down there. So,
Yeah, boy.
uh, um, so you've got about a year of dev left. I know behind the scenes you've got some exciting announcements that we can't aren't fit to print yet. But what are you like most looking forward to in this upcoming year in your dev process?
Oh man. I mean, for me, it's so interesting because we've finally, sorry, I was getting slack. We finally
Okay.
got all of our pipelines in place, and it's this well-oiled machine, and we kind of
Okay.
know what all the
That's what I was
next
going to
steps
ask.
are.
If
Yeah,
you
which
feel
is
you've gotten
great.
over that like hump where it's
Yeah.
now become
Yep. So I'm
okay.
already starting pre-production on our next game, which is super, super exciting. And I'm also raising 20 million for that game, which is fun and tiring at the same time. But yeah, so for me, it's I'm I love launching stuff, so I can't wait. We're starting to talk to our PR agent, and we're talking to the platforms, and we're trying to figure out how all that goes. We just signed with United Talent Agency, so our agent. I'm meeting with our Hollywood agent next week about some of those business negotiations and stuff like that. And I love all that stuff. I'm definitely, it's interesting, man. As a game dev, I'm very much a CEO, where I love running the business, and I really enjoy the business development aspects and the user acquisition aspects and the go to market strategies, and all of that stuff is like my crack. Beyond just making the game itself.
Yeah.
So I'm really, really looking forward to the launch. I'm really looking forward to when we get to show it off and have a trailer and be a part of different uh things that I can't say, and yeah, man, that's gonna be really fun, and getting the game in the hands of a ton of people will be an absolute blast.
Sweet, dude. So we're getting a little tight on time, but we have to talk about two things. One is you're a DJ.
I am.
So I know you've done a couple shows for GDX. You've also I guess I don't know, is it every like 3 months or so you put out like a new set on
Yeah,
your
it's I try to do every month. I've been bad at it lately as stuff's gotten really busy, but I try to put out a new mix at least once a month if I can on Mixcloud. It's been cool, man. I now I'm at the point where I chart globally. I most recently charted #1 in the world in dubstep on Mixcloud, which is like a super cool, made me feel awesome about myself
yeah.
thing. It's a hobby, it's not a job.
How
It
do
was
people
definitely
find you?
mixcloud.com/bergsdj, BERGS DJ, is where you can find my Mixcloud stuff. But I try to do, I DJ at PAX every year, PAX East and PAX West. We'll be doing PAX West again this year. For the Poker Crawl, I'll be DJing that. Hopefully with Garnett Lee, who's at Raw Fury. We tried to DJ together at PAX East and then had technical difficulties, so it was just me
That
holding it
sucks.
down the whole time.
I didn't know Garnett did I didn't know he did DJing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's in Sweden now, so he's like in like the crux of like dope, house
Yeah,
music and that kind of stuff. It's cool.
that's awesome.
Yeah,
All right. Well, I don't think I'm doing PAX West this year because I'm moving, but I'm doing PAX East next year. So,
there you go.
and I think we'll get you back out to a GDX before too long.
Oh yeah, absolutely, man, for sure.
So then the last thing I kind of want to talk about, and feel free if there's something you want to chat about too, but we both are in the Midwest, trying to make this game dev thing a thing in the Midwest. So I mean, the standard barrage of questions: why the Midwest? Can we make it happen? What are some things we need to do? I'd like to sort of wrap up our conversation chatting about that for a bit, because I've been spending the past 11 years trying to make this a hot spot for this industry. And I think we've made some progress, but we've got some more steps to go, man. How are we going to do this?
Yeah, here's my master plan. I'll just give you my master plan, because like
Okay.
I mean, our goal at Guiley is to be as big as Blizzard, right? Or except like actually good culture internally. It's such a bummer, because like Blizzard used to be this company that I looked up to so much, and
Yeah,
they're definitely not now.
we were talking about, so I play, I don't think I've gone a Volpe Creates show without mentioning the fact that I play Path of Exile, but that is based on D2 with a lot of like the old
Hmm.
Diablo 2 folks. But it really is sad in the 90s into the early 2000s. Every time Blizzard announced something, every time they showcased a
It was such a
trailer.
yeah. I mean, I've gone to 10 BlizzCons maybe. Been able to hang out with Mike Morheim, and who was the founder of Blizzard, and
Mhm.
all that stuff. And so anyway, it's a total tangent that I don't necessarily want to get on, because it's kind of depressing. But
Yeah.
but my goal is to get we want to have 1,000 people in Cincinnati with game dev jobs, for sure. And so you know, we're thinking really big, and my approach is we have killer sort of pathways for junior talent here. Within the Guiley Games office, we have 6 universities that'll have game dev um, uh,
Programs.
programs within a 100-mile radius. Shawnee State, Miami. I don't even know if Ohio. I'm not counting Ohio State because
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on there. But UC, Xavier, NKU,
Oh,
EKU. There's
oh, you.
yep, OU, ton of them. So junior talent, is pretty easy to find. We have an internship program that we most recently had about 15 interns last time we did it. We're looking to spin that up as soon as we hire a new admin, so Kim doesn't have to manage all of it. She gave me the thumbs up on that. And then so interns is one way, making sure that we're building into the talent that already exists here locally. And then for us, we're actually starting a second studio out in LA for senior talent, where we're bringing in, much more experienced talent. And then ultimately over, the next 10 years, that senior talent's going to build into the junior talent that they're doing out in Cincinnati to level them up, where, 10 years from now, we have an entire cohort of wonderful expert senior talent here in the Cincinnati area that can, sort of begin this loop of building each other up. So that's my plan, right? I think there's, here locally, there's a huge lack of senior talent. Right now, we're trying to find a senior production artist, and it's damn near impossible to find one locally. And so, but we want. I think you have to have a long-term vision. Is the short answer. I think you have to have a long-term vision of pouring back into the ecosystem, and we got to be the people putting the money in, man. No one else is going to do it. We got to be the ones that put the money in. So that's ultimately my goal, at least.
Yeah. I agree. I think that we have no shortage of passionate, dedicated people that want to be in the industry. But most of them are, new graduates or relatively new to the industry. So the senior talent, I think, is definitely a challenge. But I do hear every time I go out to, a PAX or a GDC or whatever, I hear time and time again folks that are in the Midwest that are out on the coasts working, and they're like, "Man, I would love to come back to the Midwest and work if the opportunity existed there." And of course, I talk to city council, mayor's office, all that, and it's always the same thing. It's like, well, we want to create jobs, we want to attract young people. It's like, well, you got to put the money into it, and you need to have a glide path for graduates who are leaving their degree program. They have to have a job opportunity. Now, I think COVID and remote work has kind of shuffled that up a little bit. I've seen a lot of folks in our community who are now working at like top tier places like Rockstar and Naughty Dog and Blizzard and Bungie that have been working in Ohio remotely. So that's cool, but that's something that, I mean, that's not sustainable, right? Like as soon as a lot of the COVID precautions begin to fall away, most of those studios are going to want you out where they are.
Oh yeah.
And so I think the money thing is a big thing. How do we attract that kind of capital into the state? Like what is the kicker that we need to show them?
I mean, I think we need to get Midwesterners over the idea that entertainment is a hit making, like a hit or die sort of business model. I've had plenty of VCs that I've talked to that just like won't touch anything entertainment based, and I'm like, guys, it makes more money than music and movies combined. Like,
Yeah,
also, this is a technology, and creative IP has more long term value than technical IP. There's a reason that Disney owns Mickey Mouse, and that Barbie, which is a terrible IP, has a new movie coming out. That's an IP that's what, 50 or 60 years old.
sure.
And then Facebook's ad platform is getting destroyed, and it's only what, 15 years old, right? Like, it's as technical IP, like it's not
Yeah,
going to last.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. If you just look at pure tech IP, you have at best like 3 years before that begins to fade. You need to keep
and
building
and
on it.
begins to become legacy. Yeah.
Yep, yep.
So
Uh,
getting the people that have dormant capital today in the area, because they do exist, to understand that it's worth putting capital into creative IP is going to be a big part of that. But the only way to do that is to have a success here first. So somebody's got to take the risk and do it on their own, which is why we're taking big swings, man.
Yeah. It's a shame though, because I'm not saying you're not right, but it's sort of, it goes against the core thing where you're like proving to people that it's not a hit based industry. And the way to do that is by having a big hit. It's like,
Correct.
how do how do we solve this square peg round hole problem?
Do the
Um,
thing.
yeah, do the thing. And I one of the big issues. So I've gone toward. I'm gonna word this. I'm gonna word it as eloquently as I can. I've spent a lot of time with public-based funding. So you talked earlier. There's a lot of ways to raise money, right? There's debt, which I don't consider debt raising. It's just you're taking out
Yeah.
a loan. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just debt, right? But then you've got grants, and sometimes there's different, like the city or the state might provide avenues for things. And then in Ohio, we have like our big thing is our third frontier funding
Hmm.
system. So Ohio's kind of chopped up, for those who don't know, into segments, and each segment has its own public kind of funded VC system, if you want to call it that. And very, very few of those dollars go towards entertainment. And I think that that's even outside of entertainment, very few of those dollars go outside things that Ohio isn't generally comfortable with. And I think that that's a part of a larger problem. Like you said, how do you tell this story? Because video games as an industry are huge. It's a creative industry. It's a tech industry. IP. I think that's a great point, that IP has long, like character and story based IP has a lot of longevity. I mean, look at Star Wars. Like most of the Star Wars stuff sucks. The movies aren't that good. A lot of the shows aren't that
Oh, come
good.
on. I like them all. I like
You
all the
like
Star
them
Wars stuff.
all?
I like it all. Yeah.
You like
I'm
every single?
easy to please when it comes to
Hmm.
Star Wars. Yeah.
All right. Well, we can have a separate Star Wars conversation. But I think Star Wars is kind of like, it's warmed its way into people's hearts, and
Hmm.
people love it. Uh, that's what sells, right? It's not even necessarily the quality of an individual thing, though you apparently love them all. Uh,
Well,
but
we as humans crave storytelling, right?
yeah,
Like it's
absolutely.
in our biology and our survival mechanisms to crave storytelling. And so if you see that as an asset, if you see storytelling as an asset and an ability to tell a story
Yeah.
as a way to create revenue, that's something that you should be investing in.
Well, the point I've been making for the past few years is I've finally and I've told some like higher up people that been talking to for 10 years. I was like, look at COVID, right? When COVID happened and the world shut down and everyone was worried about, the end of the world, where were people spending their money? It wasn't at the Gap. It wasn't on insurance. It wasn't in some, enterprise level B2B solution. It was video games, movies, and music. That was the thing that weathered the storm. When people were scared and they didn't know what was going on, that's where people went. So like I think to your point you're making, like the story's already been told. We just need to, I guess, convince you tend to go towards individual high net worth funders, which I think might be the way to go, because the city and state funding mechanisms just are not, as much as they want to create new economic opportunities and new
Well, and
sectors.
they're not trailblazers, right? Like they're people that will follow. Um, I mean, if you think about the personality profile of somebody that works in government, uh, and especially government financing, they're not necessarily people that are out here pioneering new paths of innovation.
Sure.
And so they'll follow if we can show that there's a lot of value here. That's why, I mean, talking about third frontier jobs, Ohio. That's why I'm out here saying, like, look, man, I'm going to bring 1,000 jobs to Cincinnati. I promise you, it'll happen. Might take me 10 years, and I'll do it all on my little lonesome.
Yeah.
But it'll happen, and then once it happens, I get to become the proving point that, like, look, this can create a lot of jobs, a lot of high quality, high paying jobs. So you should fund this for other people.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. I think you were mentioning it, but the the trailblazing part of it, even if you don't need to blaze trails, if you can at least give them something to latch onto,
Hmm.
some kind of, these wins that you're talking about. Um, and maybe that's where the importance of getting the private funders is. Get, some of the independent VCs onto a project. It makes it easier for something like I won't name any names, but one of the third frontier like groups. It makes it easier for them to latch onto something if they're not the lead investor on it.
Totally. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
if they can
I
come
mean,
in
I
at
think they only do follow-on investment typically. It's
no,
matching, right?
no, they'll do full. Yeah, they'll
Oh,
act as the lead, but
right on.
it's at least, I mean, that was the intent, was to open up the opportunities. And uh, I know Cincy's one of the great things that's going on in Cincinnati is there is a lot of money. There's a lot of capital that's happening in that city. I haven't seen. It's been a while since I've seen like the reports, but I think Cincinnati was like number one for a few years in a row in terms of capital raised and deployed
I
in
think
Ohio.
Drive's probably changed that though. I mean,
Yeah,
Drive Capital just raised $1 billion.
yeah, yeah. That probably will change it. Sounds like I need to go over and talk back to Drive, and
Yeah.
can I get a little bit of that smidgen? Um, so I feel you, and one of the things I like, and with COVID, I've kind of like, I've dropped the ball on this one, but for a while, we had everybody in the state. We were kind of chatting, even at GDX. I don't think you didn't come to it. This was 2019, um,
Okay.
but we had a pre-show where I had a bunch of like industry leaders and whatnot, and we just did a little dinner and drinks. I'd like to do that again. That was a good time. But just how do we keep these stoking these fires in Ohio, making these things happen, and working together on it?
Totally, man. I mean, I think what's great about the Ohio game dev community on the whole is we all try to take care of each other and help each other out wherever we can. I mean, it really is a rising tide lifts all ships, man. Anybody's win is my win and vice versa.
Totally. I'm really proud of what our group's been able to create in Central Ohio, and then the rest of Ohio. Like, we all work together and share resources. Is like, I hear about Chicago, for example. Got a bunch of friends there. Their community game dev groups do not work well together. And I think it's a shame. It works out for us because I think if Chicago did ever get their shit together, that they could lock down. I think they could regionally lock down the games industry. But for right now, they can't. So we'll take advantage of that.
There you go.
Uh, but yeah, I'm excited. You're doing some really cool stuff. I was glad we got a chance to hang out and get lots of drinks at GDEX, because it seemed like your team was beaming about all the stuff you were working on. And that's
It was
that's
cool to
great.
have everybody together. It was a very fun time, man. We rented a 6 bedroom Airbnb and all hung out like we were in our 20s.
Hmm. That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, we're getting a little close to the end here. Is there anything else you want to chat about before we end our time together?
Oh, this was great, man. Absolutely. Follow me on Twitter at Chris Bergman. Follow Guiley Games at Guiley Games. We do a weekly webcomic about game development at Guiley Games. That's really funny and dorky, and it's about all of us that work there. So follow
Yeah,
the
talk
antics
talk
there.
about that for a second, because I thought that was pretty cool how you've decided to do as almost like a dev vlog kind of thing. You're creating these little comics that are about the process of making the game.
Yeah, totally. So it's been interesting, right? Like we're still not at a place where we can show a ton of rah-rah to the public. But we want to talk and build community and talk about making games. So we've been lucky to have a couple of production artists that are killer webcomic artists in their own right. And they've come on and helped us sort of tell our story about making games in Cincinnati. And we talk about a bunch of different stuff. I think right now there's like a meet the team thing that's happening where they're going through all of us sort of our bios and stuff, but it's fun. We're always like looking for goofy shit to talk about in web comics and always paying attention to random stuff that's happening in the office. And you'll have that, oh, that'll make a good web comic, or that kind of stuff. But I don't know. It's entertaining. People seem to like it, and we get to talk to people.
That's awesome. Well, Chris, thanks so much for being on the show. It's always a blast chatting with you. I do need to make a trip down to Cincy.
Yeah, man. Come hang out at my
to hang
comic
out.
book shop.
Yeah,
Bar.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, another thing, you have a comic book shop, just another side hustle, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's just I'm just trying to live the life that my 11-year-old self wanted.
Yeah. How do you feel you're doing?
Oh, pretty good. I mean, my 10-year-old's liking it a lot,
Yeah.
so it seems like it's working out.
You're on track. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah,
Yeah, maybe I'll come down for what was it, Blink
yeah. Blink
Festival?
Festival.
All right, yeah, I'll check that out because I think that'll be a blast. But yeah, I haven't been down to Cincy in forever, so I would love to come down, hang out with the team, see your office and whatnot. So, but dude, it's been a pleasure. Love you, appreciate you being on the show.
Love you too,
Being a
man. Good
part
to
of,
catch up.
GDX. So that has been the Volpe Create Show, the weekly talk show about gaming and creative technology, happening every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern here on Twitch. Of course, you can go to volpecreates.com/Discord and join our Discord channel if you'd like. So on behalf of myself, Baby Girl, Pumpkin, Mr. Lucas, and our guest Chris, thank you all for watching, and we will see you next week.